Hello, I'm Art Eggers. I'm currently the faculty lead for the Unmanned Aviation System Technology program at the College of Southern Nevada within the School of Advanced and Applied Technology. What I'd like to address here today is the Title IV, Section 37, codification of the board policy statements as it relates to unmanned aircraft systems, specifically the use of UAS on CSN and NSHE property. The general policy states the Board of Regents and the Nevada System of Higher Education are committed to the appropriate and safe use of unmanned aircraft systems to further academic and research objectives. In the procedures, NSHE institutions must operate UAS in full compliance with all applicable federal laws, including the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration rules and regulations, and all applicable local and state laws, including the provisions of Chapter 493 of the Nevada Revised Statutes governing unmanned aircraft vehicles, and NRS 396-970, which prohibits surreptitious electronic surveillance on NSHE campuses. We fully adhere to all of these requirements, and what I would like to do is discuss how we do that and what we are mindful for in each of these requirements. First off, under the FAA requirement for 14 CFR Part 107, licensure of pilots, CSN faculty and staff do not currently operate under 14 CFR Part 107 rules, but rather under the model and hobbyist rules. As an educational institution, we're allowed to operate under Section 336 model and hobbyist rules because we have nobody that is directly compensated for any of their flights. Part 107 requires that if you have compensation, you must be licensed as a Part 107 unmanned aircraft pilot. A student may conduct model aircraft operations then in accordance with 336 in her education endeavors, and faculty teaching the aviation related courses then may operate under 336 in connection with any coursework or operations that are occurring on the educational institute property. Typically, the faculty is always on hand as directing the flight, becoming the pilot in charge in case there is an incident or a problem, and can take control of the aircraft from a student. Chapter 493, the Nevada Revised Statutes, the provision under Title 44 discusses specific to unmanned aerial vehicles. You can see that there are several of them here, and I will hit each one of them individually as they apply to NSHE and CSN operation of UAS. 493.103 really talks about incursions that might occur where a UAS or a drone has gone a little wayward, say out over a home or a development, and has the potential there for some property damages. The aircraft has to have been under 200 feet in order for there to be a violation to occur, and the homeowner or property manager or property operator owner would have to make a complaint. On the first go around, there would be no action, but if it recurred a second time, then the property owner has a right to do something about it. So this portion of Title 44-103 talks about the things that make the flight unlawful and the things that make it an incident that a property owner could make a complaint. 493.106 talks about weaponization of a UAV, of course, we would never do that and have no intention. 493-109 talks about operating within the vicinity of an airport. We have to operate under strict requirements within 5 miles of an airport, where you're operating traditionally in Class B airspace. A person may operate the vehicle within 5 miles of an airport if they first obtain consent from the authority. The only place that this would really happen would be on the North Las Vegas campus, where we are in close proximity to North Las Vegas Airport and that of Nellis Air Force Base. In that case, you would have to contact air traffic control, specifically at Nellis, and let them know that you are going to fly. The FAA currently has a ceiling restriction of 200 feet over the North Las Vegas campus that you can fly, but they typically like you to stay within 100 feet when flying over that campus. Most of our operations occur at the Henderson campus, which has little or no restrictions when flying. There is one helicopter operation that we could encounter out there, and typically it becomes a visual process. If you see a helicopter inbound, we always bring the UAS down so that there is no conflict. So in 493-109, it talks about operating within 5 miles of an airport. 493-112 is really specific to law enforcement operation. We do not engage law enforcement on operations where they're actually doing their job. We do some training for them and some familiarization as part of goodwill with the community, but there is never a case where we would use the CSN aircraft for a law enforcement operation. 493-115, operation by a public agency, and we are pretty much a public agency, so we may operate unmanned vehicles only if before the operation the public agent registers the unmanned aerial vehicle with the department pursuant of subsection 2. We register all of our vehicles both with the FAA and the Department of Public Safety. The agency operates the vehicle in accordance with the regulations adopted by the department and must not operate UAS for the purposes of assisting law enforcement in conducting a criminal case or a prosecution. 493-118 then discusses specifically the public safety requirement for registering all unmanned vehicles with the state agency, and we have done that. There is a requirement to identify the public agency, contacts, sufficient information about the vehicle, the registration number. That is done to the FAA, and our information about our vehicles goes on a list that can be accessed via the website. If you go to the Department of Public Safety website and click on under documents, the link that says registered unmanned aerial vehicles, you can see on there every vehicle that we have ever owned and or operated is on the Nevada Department of Public Safety website. So it gives you an idea of how many aircraft we have. Currently we have in excess of $500,000 worth of aircraft and equipment. If we take a look at the information on these websites, first off, Title 44 discusses each of those areas that we just took a look at, and you can see here, this is from the website, you can see that it is quite exhaustive on what is covered under the aeronautic portion. In the next discussion area, Chapter 396, the Nevada Higher System of Education provisions that relate to the unlawful acts. 396, 970 talk about electronic surveillance on campus. We never engage in electronic surveillance on campus. We actually have some signs that we're putting out that alerts any passersby that if we have a UAS in the air and they're doing any recording, be it photography or videography, that they are aware that they may be captured in a frame or in a video. Under the subsection 1, we are allowed as a class or a laboratory to use our video and photography equipment on the aircraft. Also, the subsection 2 talks about engaging in any type of surreptitious electronic surveillance on campus. Again, we do not specifically do that. The only time that we do any recording is if we were asked to take pictures on campus, like progress photos of the student union. Otherwise, there is nothing going on that we would be currently doing any photography or videography. So all of this information under Chapter 396 talks about the general provisions, what the Board of Regents has identified. You can see here, again, this is from the website. It's quite a robust document that covers many areas, and I just looked at those areas that specifically apply to UAS. On the last section, Chapter 41, Actions and Proceedings, this relates specifically to the liabilities and the insurance requirements. Federal regulations supersede any conflicting board or institutional policies or procedures. NSHE employees, staff, and students using UAS as part of their employment or part of the NSHE program must abide by the most current FAA state regulations, including the necessary federal and state authorizations. If UAS operators are uncertain of the applicable regulations at the time of flight planning, the agency, which is actually a contractor to the governor's office, the Nevada Institute for Autonomous Systems, or NIAS, is a source of information. We typically go straight to the FAA. They are the premier source for any information regarding unmanned aviation systems. Permission for flight operations should also be required from property owners and managers in advance of flight activities. Since we primarily operate over NSHE CSN property, this is really not an area we get involved with at any length. In the area of obtaining flight permissions, we have a list of points of contact that we identify prior to any flights, which includes the risk manager, the provost at Henderson campus, the security, and anybody else that we think that may have some concern about us flying UAS on the Henderson campus. In terms of confirming insurance coverage, we have looked at and gotten information from the General Counsel that we are covered under Chapter 41 of the Nevada Revised Statutes as it relates to insurance and liability. You can see here Chapter 41, again, a very extensive list of areas of particular concern that relates specifically to liability and insurance. Although there is not a specific one in here that identifies unmanned aviation systems, there are areas of liability in general that would be related to operating unmanned aircraft systems or aviation systems and the potential for a problem to occur where there might be personal or property damage. All NSHE UAS operators must take all reasonable measures to protect the safety of those involved in the operation and general public to avoid violating privacy rights of the general public. Again, we confine our flights generally to the Henderson campus, although there are housing developments on two sides of the property where we fly. We take special precautions not to deviate and fly into the neighborhoods, and we are always very aware of our surroundings. We follow the FAA requirements for a remote pilot in charge and visual observers to ensure that we have the highest degree of safety and concern when we're operating a UAS on the Henderson campus or in any airspace. Each institution shall establish policies and procedures governing the use of UAS that comply with federal and state laws governing flight and may include these items. And we have put together documents, memorandums of understanding, and procedures that we use when we fly on the Henderson campus to ensure that we stay within the guidelines of federal, state, local laws and that of the FAA. Requesting required permissions and receiving guidance requiring UAS on campus, that we have a designation of an individual on campus to serve as a UAS representative or coordinator. Currently, we have people within the Department of Applied Technology, myself, Art Eggers, and or Paul Bulver, that act as the UAS representative or coordinator until the CSN leadership designates a specific person to be the UAS coordinator. UAS use of educational, recreational, or hobby purposes on campus, including requiring membership in organizations that provide insurance coverage as part of the membership. Again, we are within the guidelines of NSHE and CSN liability and insurance, so we have that covered as part of being an employee. Limitation and or designation of specific campus areas in times of UAS flights. Although our aircraft do have geofencing on them, we stay within the confines of the property at Henderson campus. Prohibition for use in and around housing does not apply to us because we do not have housing on CSN property. Each institution shall establish procedures as it relates to the central registration and approval of all UAS vehicles and notification of the police and security when operations occur. And we do this. Every mission is preceded with a notification to the risk manager, the provost, security, and police at the Henderson campus. We strictly do not fly over sporting events or outdoor activities. In any case, we do not operate over people. FAA requires that you do not operate over people. UAS use for research off campus. We have currently not had an opportunity to do that, but we look forward to that. Export control, since we don't sell any technology or UAS, we don't get involved with that requirement. Third-party requests for flights over a campus, i.e. media requests. If we have anybody come on campus like the Las Vegas Metro or Fire and Rescue, sometimes we have local industry leaders that come and fly. We are always there as the remote pilot in charge or the supervisor on campus, and third parties do not come over and fly autonomously. They are always under the direct supervision of either myself or Paul Bulver in terms of keeping track of what's going on. Use of third-party contractors for UAS operation. We haven't had that happen specifically. Training requirements for UAS operators. Anybody that operates on the CSN property has either a Part 107 or they have gone through the safety training for Part 107, which is a course called ALC 451 that is administered through the FAA safety website. Upon completion of the course, the operator receives a certificate of training that lets anyone know that this person has gone through the safety class that the FAA operates. Discipline for violation of UAS policies and procedures. This would end up being a written document that would occur if there were an incident on the campus. UAS use for other purposes on or off campus. The only time that we would have this occur is if we went out and did a demonstration or were a presence. In the upcoming year, we actually have an event planned where we will be working with a charity and we will be a static display but not a operational display where we would be flying the UAS as part of the promotion. Section E talks again about the third-party use of NSHE property, including institution contractors and vendors wishing to use a UAS over NSHE property must first receive approval through the president of the institution with authority over the property. So the CSN president has the ultimate approval authority for anybody to fly on any of the NSHE property. The caveat here is that the president may delegate the responsibility to an individual as the CSN UAS coordinator. Any faculty, staff, or students operating UAS for educational, hobby, or recreational purposes on NSHE property must abide by the FAA guidelines for safety as it relates to model aircraft operations. This again is under Section 336 of the FAA requirement. Finally, sanctions. Any violations of board or institutional policy by an individual will be dealt with in accordance with applicable board and institutional policies and procedures, which may include disciplinary actions up to and including termination of employment and enrollment. So we are very mindful of that sanction and that requirement when we operate UAS. Legal prohibitions regarding physical presence on campus, including trespassing and other legal action, may also be pursued using third parties or against third parties that operate UAS in violation to the policy. And finally, fines and damages that may occur by individuals, institutional departments, or units that do not comply with the policy will not be paid by NSHE and will be the responsibility of the persons involved. So in putting the program together, we adhere strictly to Title IV, Section 37 of the Board of Regents policy as it pertains to UAS operations. We're very mindful of the other documents that we are required to be cognizant of. Chapter 41, the NRS 396, and the 493 NRS requirements. So in every case, our operations are strictly adhered to and controlled by these requirements. I hope that helped and gave you a better understanding of operating a UAS on NSHE property and the requirements that the Board of Regents has levied in terms of policy of flying UAS on NSHE property. Thank you.